Lucas always believed that one day he could be more than just a janitor. At 35, he worked at a large technology company, a modern building with glass walls that reflected the vibrant city around it. His day started early, before the sun even rose. While most employees were still asleep, he was already in his blue uniform and with his cleaning cart in hand, ready to face another day. As he walked through the silent hallways, Lucas reflected on his life. Since he was young, he dreamed of being part of the world of technology, rather than just being the man who cleaned the tables where brilliant ideas were generated. He saw young talents gathering, discussing innovative projects, without realizing that there was someone like him who dreamed of being recognized. Lucas was an invisible figure in that environment. Employees passed by him without looking, as if he were a shadow. He remembered a time when he was full of dreams and hopes, but these feelings were being eroded by the routine and humiliation he faced daily. Smiling at others was his way of facing reality, but inside, pain consumed him. Sometimes, as he cleaned the conference rooms, he would hear laughter and light-hearted conversation. One day, he overheard an executive making fun of him, calling him the office ghost. Those words cut deeper than any blade. He wanted to scream, wanted them to see the person he really was, but all he could do was keep his head down and get on with his work. After hours of cleaning, the routine began to become second nature. Lucas always found small moments of relief, like when he would get lost in his thoughts or daydream about a different future. He knew he couldn't allow himself to give up, even though reality was harsh. Hope was there, even if it was hidden beneath the weight of humiliation. As the first employees arrived for the day, Lucas retired for his short break, dreaming of the possibility of one day being seen and heard. With a soft sigh, he looked out the window, watching the city awaken. Life went on outside, full of opportunities that seemed so far away, but that he was determined to reach. The next morning began like any other, but a cloud of expectation hung in the air. Lucas was preparing for a day of work, but little did he know that a new episode of humiliation was about to happen. As he cleaned the meeting room where a team of executives were preparing for an important presentation, he felt the atmosphere charged with tension. The excited voices and carefree laughter contrasted with his own reality. During the meeting, Lucas was called to take out the trash. As he entered, he heard the team manager, a tall, arrogant man, making sarcastic remarks. "Look, our ghost is back," he laughed, as the others joined in the jeering. Laughter echoed through the room, and Lucas felt his face burn with embarrassment. He tried to focus on his work, ignoring the laughter and jokes about his presence. At that moment, something inside him snapped. Lucas was used to being snubbed, but hearing his hopes reduced to a joke hurt him deeply. As he took out the trash, he saw the smiling faces of the executives, all dressed impeccably, discussing brilliant ideas and dreaming big. He wasn't part of that world. He was just an accessory, just another object in the room. As he left, he noticed that their eyes hadn't left. They continued to laugh, to make jokes about the office ghost, as if he were invisible. That scene repeated itself so many times that Lucas wondered if he really existed for them. In his mind, a whirlwind of emotions formed: anger, sadness, and a growing sense of helplessness. He wanted to scream. He wanted them to see his pain, but the words wouldn't come out. After completing his work, Lucas retreated to the bathroom. Looking into the mirror, he saw the reflection of a tired man, with eyes that bore the weight of humiliation. He felt trapped in an endless cycle, like a bird in a cage, his dreams stifled by the harsh reality. As he wiped his face, he promised himself that he would not let this define him. He needed to find a way out, a way to change his narrative. With a heavy heart, Lucas decided he could no longer accept this life. Something inside him was changing, and determination was slowly beginning to blossom. He knew he had to fight to be heard, and from that moment on, he would commit to finding a new direction. That same week, while performing his usual tasks, Lucas found himself in the conference room again. It was a familiar space, but this time, his gaze was more attentive. As he was wiping down the tables, something shiny in a corner of the room caught his eye. As he got closer, he realized it was a crumpled document on the floor. Curious, he bent down and picked it up. When he unfolded the paper, he was surprised to discover that it was an innovation project that could transform one of the company's products. The ideas were there, detailed with graphs and proposals that seemed promising. It was clear that this idea could take the company to a new level. As he read, Lucas felt a mix of excitement and disbelief. Here was an opportunity he had never imagined he would find. Lucas's mind began to race, and he quickly recalled his own ideas that had always been ignored. A combination of inspirations and solutions were popping into his head. If only he had the chance to present this to someone who would listen. For the rest of the day, he couldn't get the project out of his head. As he cleaned, he visualized what he could do with the information, how he could improve and adapt the proposals. A spark of hope flared in his heart. Lucas decided he needed to prepare to present his ideas. The thought spurred him on. He could be seen. He could have a voice. Over the next few nights, Lucas dedicated himself to studying not only the project he had found, but also design and programming concepts. He watched videos, read articles, and delved into anything that could help him better understand how he could contribute. With each new piece of knowledge, his confidence grew. The project that had been thrown on the floor became a light at the end of the tunnel. He was determined to transform his life, to no longer be a ghost in the office. It was time to stand up, to fight for his place, and, finally, to be heard. Lucas knew he needed to do something big, and that this was his chance to come out of the shadows. With a new sense of purpose pulsing through him, Lucas prepared himself for the next step. The idea of presenting his suggestions to the board made him nervous, but determination drove him. He was ready to show that, even coming from a place of invisibility, he had a lot to offer. With the project still on his mind, Lucas decided it was time to take action. He woke up early every morning, dedicating his hours before work to studying. With the soft light of dawn illuminating his small apartment, he sat at his makeshift desk, surrounded by notebooks and notes, determined to transform his future. Lucas spent hours watching online classes, absorbing concepts of design, programming, and management. Each video he watched was a new knowledge base, and with each lesson, his confidence grew. At first, he felt a bit lost, but he soon realized that each small step forward brought him closer to his goal. The idea of presenting his suggestions to the board became more concrete every day. After long nights of studying, Lucas felt exhausted but at the same time energized. The humiliation he had suffered seemed to be slowly replaced by an unshakable determination. He remembered every disparaging comment he had heard, but now, instead of letting it get him down, he used those memories as fuel for his fight. Each mockery made him stronger, more determined to prove his worth. One night while studying, Lucas had an unexpected inspiration. He thought of a mentoring program he could implement, where young talent, regardless of their position in the company, could share ideas and learn from each other. The idea filled him with enthusiasm. He envisioned a collaborative space where everyone could be heard, no matter their role. However, with the excitement also came fear. Fear of failure, of rejection. The idea of exposing himself again, of putting himself in a vulnerable position, made him hesitate. But Lucas knew he couldn't let fear rule his life. With a deep sigh, he decided that the only way to change his reality was to take a risk. After days of preparation, Lucas began to sketch out his ideas, putting together a clear, concise presentation that would convey his vision. He knew this was his chance to shine, to step out of the shadows and become an active voice in the company. With each word he wrote, he felt a mix of anticipation and hope. Finally, the decision was made. Lucas would stand up and speak. The determination that burned inside him was stronger than any fear. He was ready to change his life and, who knows, transform the culture of the company that had kept him invisible for so long. The day of the presentation arrived, and with it came a wave of nervousness that Lucas couldn't ignore. As he entered the meeting room, he noticed the skeptical expressions on the faces of some of his colleagues. Those who saw him as nothing more than a janitor couldn't understand why he was there, facing a project they considered beyond their reach. The atmosphere was heavy, and voices were lower than usual. As he waited for his turn to speak, Lucas watched the group of executives discussing their ideas, all dressed in expensive suits and with their postures firmly in place. He remembered the jokes and laughter he had heard earlier and felt a pang in his heart. How could he stand up for himself in front of people who had never considered him? But then, a small voice inside him whispered, "This is your chance." When he was called upon, Lucas stood up, took a deep breath, and began his presentation. He spoke with passion and clarity, sharing his ideas and the vision for the mentoring program he wanted to implement. However, as his words filled the space, he noticed some snide reactions and wry smiles. It was as if his colleagues still couldn't see past his position. One of the executives interrupted, asking sarcastically, "And what do you, a janitor, know about innovation?" The question felt like a punch in the gut for Lucas. He hesitated, but instead of backing down, he decided to use this humiliation as motivation. He responded firmly, explaining that innovation could come from anywhere, that new perspectives often emerge from those outside the core circle. Despite their resistance, Lucas pressed on. With each slide he presented, his confidence grew, and he began to notice small changes in the executive's expressions. A few eyebrows raised in surprise, and whispers of curiosity began to echo around the room. He was capturing their attention. At the end of the presentation, a deep silence fell over the room. Lucas looked around, expecting feedback, but what he received were confused looks. He felt a wave of doubt. The skepticism he had expected didn't seem to have diminished, but deep down, he knew he had taken an important step. He had put himself out there, challenged the norm, and for a moment, he had been heard. As he left the room, Lucas felt a mixture of relief and frustration. Even in the face of resistance, something inside him had changed. He realized that, regardless of the reaction of others, he had found his voice and committed to fighting for change. Now, he needed to prepare for what was to come. After the presentation, Lucas sat in a nearby cafe, adrenaline still pumping through his veins. He stared at his reflection in the window, wondering if he had really done the right thing. The executive's words still echoed in his mind, but at the same time, he felt like he had broken through an invisible barrier. He had spoken up, expressed his ideas, and, above all, shown himself vulnerable. The following days were difficult. Some colleagues still saw him as an inferior figure, but there were also those who approached him, curious about the presentation. They began to ask questions about his ideas, and Lucas, despite his insecurities, felt a new purpose emerging. He knew he had to keep fighting, not only for himself, but also for all those who felt invisible. That afternoon, Lucas decided to gather a small group of colleagues to discuss his mentoring project. He chose people who had already shown interest in collaborating and who, in some ways, were already marginalized in the corporate environment. As the conversation progressed, he realized that many shared their experiences of exclusion and devaluation. The conversation became a safe space where everyone could express their ideas and feelings. With enthusiasm growing, Lucas and his group began to outline a concrete plan. They decided to create a more polished presentation to take to the board, showcasing not only the importance of inclusion, but also the benefits that a mentoring program could bring to the company. The group's unity brought a sense of strength and community, and Lucas saw, for the first time, the possibility of making real change. He remembered the jokes and the put-downs, but now they were fueling his determination. With each step he took, the image of a more inclusive and collaborative workplace became clearer in his mind. The fear of what others thought began to fade, giving way to a sense of responsibility. He wanted to fight not only for himself, but for everyone who felt the pressure of invisibility. With a new plan in hand, Lucas and his team prepared for their next presentation. They wanted to not only share their ideas, but also show how inclusion could transform the company's culture. Lucas's confidence grew, and for the first time, he felt like he was on the right track. The day of the new presentation arrived, and Lucas was nervous but also excited. He had met with his group several times in the previous weeks, honing his ideas and developing a more robust and inspiring presentation. Now it was time to share it all with the board once again. But this time, he wasn't alone. The support of his peers gave him confidence and a new sense of purpose. As Lucas walked into the conference room, he felt a difference in the air. There was a palpable sense of anticipation, and he noticed that for the first time, some executives seemed willing to listen. Lucas's team was standing by his side, ready to support every word he said. The atmosphere was more collaborative, and this encouraged Lucas to prepare for what was to come. As he began his presentation, his colleagues took turns presenting different sections of the project. Lucas saw the sparkle in their eyes and felt the energy in the room shift. Instead of cynical laughter, he noticed focused faces and a few approving glances. The feedback they received during the presentation was encouraging, and this motivated him even more. As the group talked about the importance of inclusion and a mentorship program, Lucas remembered all the humiliation he had faced. But now, instead of sadness, he felt a surge of strength. He was there, not only representing himself, but also all those who had been overlooked. When it was his turn to speak, Lucas took a deep breath and looked around at the executives. He presented his vision for a more inclusive workplace, where every employee could feel valued and heard. Innovation doesn't just come from the elite, he said passionately. It comes from ideas that can be found everywhere, even from voices that are often ignored. The board's reactions were mixed. Some seemed intrigued, while others were still skeptical. But something had changed. They could no longer ignore Lucas and his group. The idea of a mentoring program began to resonate in the room, and the discussion took a more serious turn. At the end of the presentation, the director, a respected woman, asked a question. How do you see this program being implemented in practice? Lucas's heart raced, but he answered confidently, outlining a step-by-step plan that showed not only how the program would work, but also how it could benefit the company in terms of innovation and employee morale. When he finished, the room filled with murmurs of appreciation. Lucas smiled, knowing he had made an impact. Regardless of the outcome, he had found his voice and, more importantly, he had inspired others to join the fight for change. After the presentation, the mood in the room was tense. Lucas looked at the faces of the board of directors, each of them deep in thought. He exchanged glances with his colleagues, who seemed just as anxious as he was. The director, a woman with sharp eyes and a firm posture, gestured for everyone to calm down. The silence was almost palpable. Thank you, Lucas and the team, for your inspiring ideas, she began, her voice firm but with a hint of empathy. This is a topic we need to address seriously. Lucas felt butterflies in his stomach. He knew this was a crucial moment. The director went on to highlight some of the suggestions that had been made. She mentioned the importance of diversity and how inclusion could not only improve the work environment, but also increase creativity and innovation. This made Lucas's heart soar with hope. It seemed like they were finally starting to listen. However, the executive who had been more cynical in the first presentation was quick to react. He raised his hand and offered a critique. While the idea of inclusion is a good one, what guarantees that it will work in our current culture? We need results, not just good intentions. His words echoed in the room, and Lucas felt the weight of the challenge. The director looked at Lucas as if she were passing the buck. He took a deep breath, prepared to respond. I understand your concerns, he said. But inclusion is not just a concept, it is a strategy. The program we propose not only provides opportunities, but also creates a space where innovative ideas can flourish. This is an investment that I believe will yield visible results. The conversation continued, and the directors began to debate among themselves. Lucas watched closely, noticing how the mood slowly changed. The director began to ask more specific questions about the implementation of the program, and Lucas saw an opportunity to provide practical examples of other companies that had successfully adopted similar strategies. The debate continued, and as ideas were discussed, Lucas realized that his colleagues' voices were being heard. The program was beginning to take shape, and he felt part of something bigger. What had once been just a dream seemed to be becoming a reality. At the end of the meeting, the principal made a surprising announcement. We will consider the proposal and convene a team to work on the next steps. The murmur of approval in the room made Lucas's heart race. He had done it. The fight for a voice and recognition was beginning to bear fruit. He exchanged glances with his colleagues, who were smiling in triumph. In that moment, Lucas realized that this was not just a personal victory, but a significant step for everyone who had felt invisible. After the meeting, Lucas and his colleagues left the room with a mixture of relief and excitement. The confirmation that their proposal would be considered was a clear sign that their voices had finally been heard. However, Lucas knew that this was only the first step in a long journey. Implementing the mentoring program would require effort, dedication, and a constant fight against old mindsets. In the following days, Lucas was invited to join the team that would work on structuring the program. He felt honored, but also anxious. The responsibility weighed heavily on his shoulders, and he wanted to ensure that his ideas were not only well-intentioned, but also effective. With the support of his colleagues, Lucas began to develop a more detailed plan. They met regularly, brainstorming ideas on how to create an inclusive environment that encouraged everyone to participate. He realized that the voices of his colleagues, once marginalized, were now becoming an essential part of building this new space. One of the biggest achievements was the creation of a diversity committee that would include representatives from different departments. This would ensure that everyone, regardless of their position, could voice their opinions and contribute their experiences. Lucas knew this would be an effective way to break down the barriers that still existed within the company. As the plan unfolded, Lucas remembered the humiliations he had faced. Now, instead of letting them discourage him, they became a constant reminder of why he was fighting. He wanted no one to feel invisible anymore. He wanted to make sure everyone had a chance to be heard. The challenges were many. Some executives were still reluctant to support the program, and there was resistance in certain quarters. However, Lucas and his team continued to present data and case studies that demonstrated the benefits of an inclusive environment. They organized workshops and feedback sessions where everyone was encouraged to share their ideas. Over time, more employees began to get involved, and enthusiasm grew. The company was gradually transforming. The once cold and uninteresting work environment was now buzzing with new ideas and perspectives. Lucas felt part of a quiet but powerful revolution. Every small step forward was celebrated, and Lucas realized that the fight for inclusion was creating a sense of community within the company. He no longer felt like an invisible janitor. He was now an agent of change, a leader in a movement that promised to transform the company's culture for the better. As the mentoring program began to gain momentum, Lucas faced an unexpected challenge. One of the company's most influential executives, who had always been a defender of the status quo, began to oppose the program. He believed that the initiative distracted from immediate results and that time and resources should be allocated to increasing productivity, not inclusion projects. The executive's resistance created a tense atmosphere. Many of Lucas and his team's ideas were at risk, and he knew he needed to act quickly. Strategy meetings became crucial, and Lucas was determined not to let the old mindset prevail. He put together a focused presentation that highlighted not only the benefits of the mentoring program, but also the positive results other companies had achieved with similar initiatives. Lucas wanted to show that inclusion was not just a moral issue, but a smart business strategy. However, the fight would not be easy. The executive was willing to confront Lucas and his team, and he made a point of challenging their statistics and arguments in front of everyone. The atmosphere was tense, and the executive's words resonated like an echo of his insecurities. When it was Lucas's turn to speak, he felt the weight of all eyes on him. What could have been a moment of despair turned into an opportunity to show his true strength. He took a deep breath and began to speak, articulating his argument with clarity and passion. He wasn't just defending an idea. He was fighting for a future where everyone could thrive. Lucas brought up stories of employees who had been able to increase their productivity and creativity through inclusion programs. He cited data that showed how diversity of thought led to innovative and effective solutions. The energy in the room began to shift. He noticed that some of his colleagues were leaning forward, interested. The executive who had opposed the idea was still showing resistance, but other board members began to question him. They were interested in the evidence Lucas was presenting and seemed increasingly open to the idea. This change in attitude encouraged Lucas, who felt that the tide might be turning in his favor. As the meeting drew to a close, Lucas wasn't sure what to expect. The director asked for more time to discuss the program and promised to review Lucas and his team's suggestions. Although there was uncertainty, Lucas left the room feeling like he had done what he needed to do. He had become an advocate not only for his idea, but for a better future for everyone at the company.